Siam na Strelatra. Siam to Naquilia. Heluxen. Mokwen Stetronanga to Tienuk. Siam I Strelatra. Siam Swaika Slantleni. I couldn't suit quant to the Squish Quailquins mock the tonight Strelatra. Tienuk. Tana Skolaqua. Tielton. Tuas couldn't suit Chichel. Siam mock to Naquilia. Quintina Ella. Tienuk. Siam I Strelatra. Tachalu Quayakang Squish Quailquins mock the tonight Strelatra. Quintina Ella. Xapmet Tia Snowish. Nichal stu Eitla and Skekwang Oxias net. Su Stangist Salta, the Squis J, Tienuk. Su Lalatnang Salta, the Squis J, the Squis Quelt, the Suaika Slantleni, Suane Hewell, Tienuk. Nenu Ngan at the Squinings, Sui Tatal noch Salta. Siem Suaika Slantleni. Hakon Su Traella, Tietangoch, Hakons to Stangist and Squoyans J at the Squalnichol. Ian Suit J at the school out Qutlaa. Siam I Strelatra. I Su Heok Salta. The Squish Quinning say at the Sleloch Lalta. Unil Quinisuch Awis Tias Quell. The Squalnichol. Makal Stut Lalatnang at the Sleloch Lalta. Xiela. Siam I Strelatra. Haiska. Makwensu lichwalsit and squat and schwenings tia snowish. Equins late nang tia and squel. Haiska hela collet makwensin essa. You tlut all kunistu yacht and squel tienuk. Collet kunisu chia tanga. Siam I Strelatra haiska hela siam haiska. My dear friends and relatives, as I offer words of welcome this morning, I just want to first and foremost, address the feelings of our hosts this morning, and raise my hands in acknowledgement. Each and every one of you are taking that time aside to be here, to join us this week. There's so many meaningful discussions that had taken place up to this point in this gathering, and I really want to just share that heartfelt appreciation on behalf of our hosts today, and really thank all of you for coming here and for sitting here and having that open mind and that open heart to be able to take part in some of the meaningful discussions that had taken place up to this point in this event. So my name is SDEMOXELTEN. My English name is Ian Sam. I come from the YELŽÁTથE village site. And that's one of the 4 village sites of our SÁNEČ nation. And I just want to thank all of you again. I'm hoping, honestly, I want to reflect a little bit on each and every one of you as individuals today. And I'm looking around and I see all the various backgrounds that we come from. And I'm not one to ever pose teachings or pose culture or religion on anybody by any means, but I simply do my best to try and make sure that I advocate my own teachings and my own culture, so that somehow it's going to be able to try and attract the hearts of a diverse group of people that I'm speaking to in a way that's going to either be relevant to where you come from, or you're able to kind of learn something about a people that you never understood anything about before. So our perspectives are going to be diverse in so many different ways. So as I reflect in my own ways, as I shared in the language, I hope that all of you had a good rest last night. There was so many things to take in. I know in my own culture, I think about all the discussions that took place, and some of you that might have heard some words yesterday, that really touched your heart. In a lot of ways, when you hear some of these teachings or you hear some of these things that take place in such a meaningful manner, and thinking about all the things that were put together by our hosts in a way to kind of outreach, in a way to kind of create awareness where these pathways that are trying to be generated amongst all of our faculty here and all of the students that are doing such meaningful work. You know, we can't help but do our best to reflect on some of the things that we heard, but at the same time, how are we going to implement these things into our daily lives? You know, right now, our hosts are going off of a clean slate of something that honestly has never really been done before. You know, there's so many things and there's so many fine lines that exist between us as Huilnguk people and everyone within the workforce and this economy that's living today. You know, I've often had discussions with a number of folks and sharing about that fine line that exists in between these two different worlds that we live in. And I've done my best to try and do my best to kind of implement my own ways and my own culture within, whether it's me being a father or whether it's me trying to carry some of my culture or teachings within the work that I do here at the university, or it could be that we're meeting somebody that, you know, honestly, they could just need general help or guidance in general. It might not have anything to do with work. It might not have anything to do with your studies or anything, but honestly, a lot of it usually just has to do with your own well-being as an individual. So as we kind of soak some of those things in and you think about some of the words that were shared up to this point, you think about some of the teachings and some of the feelings that came out with our presenters yesterday, that's gonna be contributing to some things that, you know, aren't going to impact us immediately, but they are going to impact some of our future generations. You know, and I look around and I see some of the younger folks that are with us that might be in the beginning of your studies. You know, and somehow this is some of the teachings or words that you're going to hear is going to impact the work that you do in the near future. So I only say this because I live and breathe the words and the teachings of elders that had taught me to be who I am and to share with me on how I should carry myself as a SÁNEĆ person. And I can't help but think every day, every morning I wake up, I think about all of those teachings that I'd taken in along the way and all of the experiences that I've had. You know, and I carry the love that I had from all of those people that had taught me. And more so because none of them are here with me anymore. So all of the elders that had shared with me and being a public speaker and helping conduct ceremonies in our longhouses all over Salish territory. So I've gone as far as Lummi, Washington, up as far as Nanaimo, and downward all throughout the different Salish territories, and helping families conduct ceremony, and that's just with respect of the work that I do. When I first started, it was only within my our four village sites of the SÁNEĆ Nation, but people started to kind of grow and understand that I had true meaning and thoughtfulness and respectfulness in the work that I do as a speaker. So I hope that some of those things that you carry and some of the words that you've heard along the way is going to somehow impact the way that you think and be able to impact that perspective that you carry, whether it's as a student or as a staff member. You know, we think about some of these things that we're contributing to. And it doesn't have to be one particular area. It could be so many different diverse areas that we carry the work that we do. Some of these teachings might be able to help bring conversations between you and your family members at home. Or it could be brought back to one of your colleagues that you work with, or somebody that you study with in one of your classes, anything. These avenues and these discussions that are taking place are helping to be able to generate a future that some of us aren't really fully able to articulate what that's going to look like. But at the same time, we do our best to try and make sure that we make those connections. You know, and I'd shared these discussions before. There's so many things that we learn in our studies. There's so many things that we learn through our jobs and through our own life experiences that allows us to use our brain and to be able to analyze some of the things that we've learned, analyze some of the things that we've carried within our own experience. But within those experiences, it's not going to mean anything if that connection doesn't be made from analyzing things in your brain to connecting it to what we call as our squelequins. And our squelequins is our inner being, our feelings that we have from within. You know, if we're able to listen to words that are being shared, we're able to listen to teachings that are being shared, I'm sure we might remember some interesting facts maybe, but honestly that's not going to be as meaningful if you don't take it into your heart a little bit. And I've often heard the analogy, you know, the best way to learn something is to teach it to somebody else. So, and as we share about our culture and as we share about our teachings, and I often advocate for the ways that we carry ourselves in our culture, that ties directly in with what Uncle Butch was saying yesterday, and with some of these things that are being shared. You know, there's a lot more meaning to being able to make that powerful impact in the work that we're doing by taking it into your heart. So there's so many things that we learn, but if we don't implement it into our lives, it almost means nothing, honestly. So I just wanted to kind of open up the doorway today to make sure I try and reflect my own feelings and some of the discussions that I've heard up to this point, and really acknowledging our hosts again for creating this new avenue to be able to try and incorporate our own ways of being as Huilngok people into the workforce that we're all doing our best to try and coincide with. So we're going to be hearing words today. I want to invite forward, we're going to be hearing words from YELŽÁTE and TIWENOMOT this morning. And some of those connections are going to be made again today. And as we move forward, I just thought I'd share this little bit from my heart to make sure that I'm helping to generate a better idea on how we should listen. No, there's one thing to write down words on your paper to try and remember and look back on in the future. But again, if we're not using our hearts to listen, no, that's what's going to bring the actual meaning to what you're learning and what you're experiencing within our time here together. So I hope that kind of helps open up our minds a little bit more to some of the words that are going to be shared today. And as I shared in the language as well, you know, some of the words that I share, when I share in the language, you know, there's little parts of our culture where I choose to use my language first, because it's within our beliefs that we look around the room, and as I share these words, I'm not only sharing them for all of you folks that we see here, I'm sharing them with people that are standing with me, the ancestors that are sitting beside all of you, from wherever you come from whatever beliefs that you live by, whatever religion you may belong to. There's a belief in my culture that we walk with ancestors each and every day. And there's a belief of mine that they help guide me. You know, I wouldn't have been able to come as far had it not been for trusting in some of those things that I carry within my roles in all different avenues, as a speaker and as an employee, as a father. You know, and as I address some of those feelings, it's all the more meaningful to me when I'm able to share in the language, so I can help all of you understand. But also, we look around and I've been told, you know, we see all these empty seats. They're not empty. You know, we all carry the wisdom and the knowledge of people that had passed on before us. And it's up to us to be able to carry that in a respectful way so that we can get that help when we need it. So being able to open up that little bit to share with you this morning, you know, I just really want to thank each and every one of you again on behalf of our hosts for being here. And at this time, I'm going to invite forward our first two presenters. Again, is going to be TIWENOMOT and YELŽÁTE. And I'll allow a bit of time for them to introduce themselves. And they're, you know, I take pride in knowing that I have relatives that are here and sharing words with me as well. So TIWENOMOT and YELŽÁTTE come from SDEMOXELTEN village site, which is another village site of our SÁNEĆ Nation. Now I just want to take that bit of time to acknowledge both of you, Robert and Mavis, who are going to come forward and share with us this morning.
You want us to sit and behave? Haitka, good to see all you folks here today. Haitka, really glad to be here with you. I appreciate the invitation, and I appreciate the audience, and always appreciate the food. I think many things have changed. If you want to sit. Many things have changed for us as we pursue our higher education. I don't know. I don't like sitting when I'm talking to people. I don't know if people know me, but my ancestral name is TIWENOMOT. And that's a really strong reminder when we talk about systems of caring. Knowing where your name comes from is part of that system of caring. We're always told when we get a name, TIWENOMOT, remember where it comes from. Remember who it comes from. Because you carry that name, and people hear that name, and they remember who you're related to. It was actually a whole system of organization of our history of our families, and making sure that we would maintain our connections to each other. And of course, the old story is we don't want to marry our cousin. But I think that's the thing is, my late Auntie Marge Louie up in Mid-Island, Shemanith, she was Underwood as well. She said, in the name as well is a matrilineal line, so that it becomes really important that you know that history, so that you realize that some people are related to you, not because they're blood related, but because they've married in. And so that there's a real important message in the names. And I think sometimes now we've altered that, we've changed that a little bit, but to try as much as we can to remember who we're related to as Wilnoch, as Coast Salish people, as Saanich people. Remember where our names are, remember the other people who carry our names, and that helps us stay connected and grounded in a really important way. So I really appreciate this invitation, because I think sometimes when I do the work that I've done around social change and gaining greater recognition for rights of Indigenous First Nations, looking at the rights particularly for women, because the Indian Act tried to eradicate any rights or privilege or respect that Indigenous First Nations women had. So I think I often bring that forward myself as someone who struggled to try to raise my family or to have recognition for folks that have been apprehended through the child welfare system or out of residential school. There was mass adoptions that people aren't aware of. The children were apprehended out of residential school and often filtered out into California, Utah, the United Kingdom. Children were adopted out in Germany as well as another place where they would go. But they were being adopted out, and it was very difficult to even find out who they were and where they are. And so some of those folks are now reconnecting, but they're 50, 60, 70 years old. But I think that enduring pull towards your homeland, towards your people, is very enduring. And I've seen it not only with Indigenous First Nations, I've seen it among others that have faced that kind of mass adoption apprehension system where they're adopted out. And I worked in government doing that kind of work where we would have elderly English people come into the office. And I mean, then this was in just before the turn of the millennium, looking for their family, looking for the siblings that they remembered were in this holding orphanage in Vancouver. There were, say, 3 or 4 siblings, and they were adopted out with no connection. So they were trying to come to us as government to try to find a way to create a reunion. But the law was so difficult, you had to explain, and I just tried to create a metaphor. If your sibling has sent up a signal that they want to reconnect, and you've got a signal out there that you want to connect, and this is before a lot of the technology that we have now, then it will happen. Other social workers will tell other social workers, that will tell other social workers, and eventually the word gets around. Or some people would just phone a band office, and they heard they were apprehended from a different place, Saskatchewan, or they lived in Saskatchewan, or they would phone a post office, they would phone the Salvation Army, they would phone different churches, because many churches had baptismal records. So it was a really hard thing to do, but some people were so motivated, they wanted to find out before they died. And I think what we've been asked to do is to talk about this lens of care. It's been something that's been very important to me, because I said I worked a lot in social policy, the determinants of health, education, social services, justice, law, many of those kind of areas, housing, and there's not a lot of people that deal with policy and practice. For myself, going into government, looking at the policy that was there, of course, looking at the law that was there, we created a new piece of law to actually open a door for Indigenous First Nations to now have standing in the planning for children. But it took until 1996, I think, to actually do that. But then to begin to implement it was a really hard thing. There's a powerful public service that's been built up over centuries to maintain control and care of Indigenous First Nations children. So to try to shift that not only meant putting law down there, but then how do you have the leadership, the political leaders enforcing it, telling people this has got to change without a whole bunch of disruption. And a lot of times government is really good at just pull a carpet out from everyone and say, sorry, we're just laying off 300 redundant social workers because First Nations are now going to hire their own social workers. And then to try to talk to the federal systems of funding to say, stop transferring money here, start transferring it over here to the First Nations agencies was really, really hard. So to try, like I said, to look at what's the policy, what's the practice, because you shift the policy again, it becomes that thing that managers, leaders now have to try to enforce. And when they're supervising their social workers, they're trying to enforce it. And so they shift the policy, but do they shift the daily practice? And that was what is and still remains very hard. The daily practice of child welfare systems and child protection is very difficult to shift. People have built up a privileged system where they really believe what they're doing is exactly right because they're following the policy, because they've been taught a certain curriculum through the earning a degree that this is the way you do it. And this is supposed to be a fail-safe system. But the challenge that I saw as we were there, they had numeric systems, numeric scaling for figuring out risk factors. So it takes the human beings out of it. So they look at someone who might have precarious housing, precarious income, maybe a little bit adventurous lifestyle, but do they know that person well enough to know that there may be systems of support built into that, that there may be relatives, babysitters, adult children coming in to help provide care? A lot of times the system doesn't know that. And that's what was the compelling piece of the law. We were saying, know who you're working with. Know First Nations people and families the way many of us know our relatives. Know that there are other resources. And some of those things came to a head for myself in doing some of that work. And again, it was Mid-Island. I had one of our support workers tell me that the ministry was coming to pick up her granddaughter, and it was up near Mid-Island. And I said, tell your granddaughter she does not have to sit there and wait for a ministry social worker to come and take the granddaughter. They haven't even talked to you. And there was actually, besides this young grandmother, there was great-grandparents that were actually very young and very able and very much in a healthy lifestyle. So it was just really quite like a scene out of a movie. We were on a little bit of a hill, and there was, the mother wasn't there. She did what we suggested. She went somewhere with the baby in a stroller. She was gone. But there's Grandpa and Grandma over there in their big truck, and there's young Grandma coming out of my car with her cell phone on her ear, and the ministry workers were coming here. And I turned to them and I just said, do you know the great-grandparents here? And she said, no, we don't. And I said, you know, the compelling part of those Aboriginal, they're called Aboriginal provisions of legislation, you should know those grandparents, those great-grandparents. You should know the grandmother here. You should know all of that, a part of your file. I said, this is really bad social work practice. And I said, I will tell you that you have no need to apprehend this child. But part of that system is also kind of has its own little practice things that are going on. And so sometimes the practice was that social workers who were now off duty but who wanted to be a respite home over a long weekend would take a child and bill back for that care. It's like doing extra overtime. And that happens more than we were aware. So I think that was something that was really hard, because that is like internal to that system. And that's where I say this whole idea of the niche of social practice, social policy, like how do we make it really apply to Indigenous First Nations as well? How do we be included, embraced by public policy? And we had a little run at that here at UVic when I was a student. There's public policy internally to the university about different kinds of harassment and different kind of discrimination and safety and learning, things like that. And there was a protester here, not a student, an older adult male, and he was carrying signage and protesting. He'd be in very specific places in front of the Native Students Union building. He'd be over in front of the library. One of the signs that I remember was treaty is apartheid. And he was talking about the Niska Treaty. And he was trying to stir people up. And it was really a lot of race hate toward Indigenous First Nations. You didn't see that right away unless you took one of his pamphlets, what then took you to a white supremacist kind of a website where a really blunt line from white Indigenous. And I was here as a student then, and I was here again as an older student. I was, I think I was almost 60. So I had younger students in my class, and as Indigenous First Nations men and women, they were really upset that the university didn't stand behind them when they made a complaint of feeling the harassment, feeling unsafe, feeling that they were being discriminated against. And one of the young men actually challenged this individual, and that's what he loved. He loved to show that Indigenous First Nations had a short fuse, they were militant, they were troublemakers, that maybe they didn't belong here. And it got to that point, like he had a long staff, like a shepherd's staff. And it was kind of to keep that distance between himself and people that he was trying to argue with or provoke a fight with. And so when my friend confronted that person, and I thought, is he going to get suspended? Is he going to get told, you know, you need to get along or whatever? Because the challenge that we had is that the president and vice president had already said there's freedom of speech here. But I said, this is just not a student. He doesn't have the same rights as the students who pay tuition. We have a right to that safe learning environment, yet I would walk way around just so I wouldn't have to provoke an argument or be seen or have him come after me. And he liked to come after me after he found out that I was First Nations and I was older, and now I was being used by people to create this tension. And it really had not a lot to do with me, except I didn't want my friend and then another friend to get in trouble, to be suspended, or to feel that they didn't belong here. So I think in the beginning there was probably about 5 students that were willing to come forward and make a complaint. We had to have our complaint sort of reheard, revisited by the internal committee of UVic, and it came forward as mediation. Pat Lane was a very skilled mediator, brought ourselves and Lorenzo Bouchard. He was the fellow with the sign. So he had to come before that hearing. And so unfortunately, by the time we got there, it took so long to go through. Some of the students were already carrying pressure of school, funding, and then worry about their own families and their families worrying about them. So then it only ended up to 2 women. Myself and another student came forward. And my friend that was supposed to be sitting with me, she almost backed out at the last minute. She said, but I did swear at him, but I did cross the road to tell him to leave us alone. And I said, and because he was protesting in front of the Parliament buildings too. This young woman had her mom visit her from the northern community. So she was showing her mom around Victoria, and he recognized her and he started yelling at her from across the street. So she was with her mother. She didn't want her mother saying, oh, is this how Victoria is? Is this how UVic is? We don't want you to go to school here anymore. So she crossed over and she told him to, you know, back down and stop. And it got worse. And then she started swearing at him. So that's her crime, was defending and trying to help her mom. So I said, you can't step down. We have to go through this together, you and I. And I said, you're standing up for yourself, you're standing up for your mom, under huge pressure. So we went, and we actually won that decision, and it bounced across campuses all across Canada, because what was supposed to be embrace of public policy was not being applied to Indigenous First Nations learners. We were being overlooked. We were supposed to just adjust and get along. And we said, this is bigger than this. This is about white supremacists being allowed to stand up and have freedom of speech when they're actually really interfering with our relationship, with our learning. And so we did have the university get behind us, and they banned him, I think it was for 3 years. And then with that, after, he had to submit approval on his protest material, his brochures, and any signage that he had. But that he wasn't allowed here, but people would see him just off the perimeter of campus. And I'm really not sure what happened to him after that, if he's still alive. But I just got on with my life. And I was really glad that there was a lot of people that got behind us after and said we were right. we were right. Not enough people, I think, went to the individuals and said, you were right and we're sorry. And to the young woman that left this institution and went back home to Alberta, I felt really bad about that because we couldn't get hold of her for a long, long time. And she was a wonderful creative writer and she needed that. But because of other traumas that she had, she just couldn't take being put up front like that again. And I get it, right? You try to save yourself. So I think there's a lot to the lens of care. And I think that as this institution grows people that will work in social policy and public social policy reform, it is important to continually build in that system of caring, not only for the work you're doing and the people that you're dealing with, but also how you manage yourself. Because sometimes when you're doing the work, and I know what it's like myself to be a caregiver, you step over here, but yourself is over there. Your practice of taking care of someone is right here, because otherwise, how would you be able to help your mom or your dad or your brother or your sister with daily washing, or help them with taking their medication or whatever it might be? Then you step back to yourself after and watch the TV programs that you want to watch after your mom's safe in bed or your dad's safe in bed or your siblings are taken care of. So I think there's a lot to that kind of learning. And I think that we're starting to see a really strong shift in who are caregivers. It's not just women anymore. We have a lot of men coming forward, which has been really gratifying. Because I've been involved in caregiving, to actually have people who can do some of the heavy lifting, I really appreciate that. Even if the heavy lifting is trying to help mobilize me and lift me, I really appreciate that. So with that, I think you kind of get the idea. I'm still in school, in case people didn't know that. I've been working on a doctorate in anthropology. I came back to school after I did my master's. I finished that in 2018. And then I came back to do a doctorate in anthropology, really looking at curriculum, history, the way we do things, our relationships with people. So I was really glad for things like the work that's been done before me, whether it's been looking at the residential school histories and the upheaval and the chaos that's created, or things like the murdered and missing women inquiry. But the good part of what's happening is this storytelling, this history telling. This is our history, and it stands alongside this history of what you call Canadian learning curriculum. There's this whole history here. And we have a place in that history. And that, to me, is my work, is trying to show and keep that place, in whether it's SÁNEĆ or some of those key places like YELŽÁTÄ. YELŽÁTÄ, the children sing that song every day about continuity and caring for that sacred place. Kevin Paul, the poet, writes a poem called Baby about YELŽÁTÄ, the mountain, and he describes it as a baby sitting with its bum up, stomach down, and baby is home, connected to where the homelands are and to the language and their sacred handprints and marks of tears up there in YELŽÁTÄ from chaos, being glad that that's there. And so it's up to us now to give life to that and to really care and be passionate about that right. And through UNDRIP and Truth and Reconciliation, we have that. But reconciliation is a very hard thing to do. Even for ourselves, we struggle with it all the time. Were we supposed to reconcile, or were we supposed to overcome this and work alongside you? And that's our success. I think for us, I look at the children, I see them singing in protocol, I see them dancing in the youth jam nights that they have, and they're celebrating the life, the reclamation of culture, the reclamation of education, and a lot of reclamation of relationships with their elders, with their teachers, and really appreciating that sometimes maybe systems are frail. Some of the parents are really struggling with residential school upheaval, some of the grandparents and great-grandparents, but they are now finding a way to navigate it and move past it, but maybe hold it in a story, maybe hold it in a film, maybe hold it in artwork. Our young people are really pushing a lot of boundaries, and I think that's really exciting to me. So with that, I just say, YELŽÁTE, thank you for your kind attention, and I'll pass to my colleague here.
Thank you very much, everyone. I'm really grateful. I'm not going to take more than just a couple minutes to share a few thoughts and just wrap up what my relatives have already done so well at sharing here. So just a couple minutes from me, but just feeling really grateful for you all to be here. Thank you to SDEMOXELTEN and for opening us up this morning, and to our hosts. If we're going to be speaking about care, I know how much care goes into organizing these types of things, and to Justina and Victor for providing us food and for cooking for us, and for this space and for being here. So YELŽÁTE for all of that. Kind of wrapping together, picking up on some of the things that Mavis said and transitioning into some of our next panels and the things that this brings to me, and the feelings that I was having from this, to hear about the children and some of the work that was being done, and to hear about our young ones, and to think about care. Had me thinking a lot about my grandma. She comes from Squamish, and she was at the Seashell Residential School, and had many things happen there. But I was remembering that if there's any part of me that knows what it means to love unconditionally, it's 100% because of her and my family, right? Like she's about this tall, she's fierce as anything, but like is the most loving person that I know. And it's just to the extent that I can stand here and share, I mean, it's because of her and all of those who came before me. When I say that I have that name YELŽÁTE, it's the same with my grandfather. That name comes to me from him. And so to the extent that I can talk and share and think about what it means about jurisdiction and care, it's because of all of those who've come before me. We heard about Kevin, and he's been one of my teachers. Yesterday from TIWENOMOT, we heard about his late dad, SÁNEĆ Philip Paul, and his work at the TIWENOMOT Tribal School. And I took some words from Kevin about the old people being their song, and we are the echo, and often I think of myself as just trying to continue that on and to carry that name. This name, I'm very lucky and privileged to carry that name, YELŽÁTE, and it shapes a lot of what I do, and I feel a great deal of privilege and responsibility to try to do that the best that I can. And so when I think about this jurisdiction and care, I mean, for me, thinking about the tribal school, TIWENOMOT, and our sacred mountain, TIWENOMOT, that when we say that we come from SÁNEĆ, we can't separate the two. That when we speak about jurisdiction, we're also speaking about care. The two things cannot be separated in any way. Same with the beliefs that we carry. We have the word SDEMOXELTEN, which means both beliefs and laws. Because when we say that we are SÁNEĆ, that only comes from after our first ancestor, Slamuch, came down at Sneedquit and was giving our Sacheli, our sacred teachings of life, that we followed and lived in these lands in respectful ways. And from that grew our people. But of course, the reason for law is that we don't always remember these things, and sometimes things distract us, we forget. And that happened with us as well, and Chel came and said there would be the flood. And so when those of us who survived that flood, my ancestors, survived that at TIWENOMOT, and tied themselves to that mountain there, that's when we became the SÁNEĆ people, the people who emerged out of that flood and said that we would never forget those sacred teachings of life that were given to us. And so even just saying the word SÁNEĆ, and that is where we come from, it ties us to place, it ties us to those stories, those teachings, those laws, that governance, that, as my uncle Jasinkton, John Eliot says, like, we can't just throw that away. We can't get rid of that. That's tied to, quite literally ties us to that mountain, to that place, to these homelands, and to those responsibilities. So I did say I'd wrap up in 2 minutes, so I should stop. But to the extent that what I try to do, right, is I feel a great deal of care and privilege as well. I'm actually working right now aside from doing this. I've brought along this field course that I teach through both UBC and UVic. And I have 19 students following me around our Ilanenuk through our homeland for like this last entire month, every day, all day long. We've been to some of these places, and we've, as SDEMOXELTEN mentioned, we don't just talk about Slumuch. On the very first day, they follow me into the cold ocean in the morning and things like that, right? We go up to Llywelyn and we talk about that place, and we put our hand on the arbutus tree that we anchored to. So again, not just having it up here, the whole class is about how do we also move that to here and to feel those things. And so I just, yeah, I'm feeling very grateful right now to have that and to be able to do this and to be all here with you today. So, Aishka Hela Siam.
I just want to say one more thing. The one more thing, what he says, SÁNEĆ. That's one of our first teachings about, and I quoted him in the work that I'm doing, is the breath that comes from our ancestors. We echo it all the time when we remember and learn what that sound is. So I just really appreciate the depth of his scholarship. We've been around kind of in the same circles for a long time, and I really appreciate, and his little grandma, she's one of the first social workers in BC, first Indigenous First Nations women social workers. She did a lot of work that really a lot of people don't recognize because she just powered down and did it. And she connected kids to grandparents and aunties and uncles so they wouldn't languish in care. But she couldn't do it all, but she tried. She really tried really hard. She's a remarkable woman, and there's good stock there. So, Haitka. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I liked you looking at me too. I was like,
No,
that's never happened.